David Rosen leaned back in his worn leather chair, flipping through the yellowed pages of an old ledger he'd found in his grandfather's attic. The entries were neat, dated as far back as 1949, each transaction marked with precision. $2.44 for bolts of cloth, $1.07 for sewing needles, $1 lent to neighbor, paid back with apple pie. The ink was faded, but the structure was solid. He remembered his grandfather well. Moish Rosen, a Polish immigrant who'd survived the war, come to America with nothing but a stitched leather wallet and a mind full of sharp habits. Moishe built a small tailoring business from scratch and raised 3 children in a modest home in Brooklyn. He died with no debt, no financial secrets, and enough savings to help every one of his grandchildren through college. David, now 39 and teetering under credit card debt, barely enough savings for next month's rent, and a failed tech startup behind him, sat in that attic trying to remember what his grandfather used to say. That's when he saw it, a folded sheet tucked into the last page of the ledger. 7 lines, handwritten and underlined in fading ink. 7 Jewish money rules, so you're never broke. David read each line out loud. 1. Never spend $1 before you've earned it. His grandfather used to repeat this like a prayer. Moish didn't believe in credit cards. If you don't have it, you don't spend it, he'd say. David remembered watching him count bills before any purchase, even when cards became more convenient. It wasn't about technology, it was about discipline. David sighed, glancing at his Visa bill. It had grown like mold, fast, quiet, and overwhelming. He pulled out a notebook and wrote Rule 1 on the first page. That night, he froze his credit cards, literally in a block of ice in the freezer. 2. Save first, spend what's left. Moishe called this paying yourself first. He treated his savings like a rent payment to his future self. 10% minimum, he'd say. You put it away like you owe it. David had been doing the opposite, spending first, then hoping something was left. The next morning, David set up an auto transfer. 10% of every freelance invoice would go to a separate savings account. He labeled it Grandpa's Pocket. 3. Money grows when it's put to work. His grandfather didn't gamble, didn't day trade, but he invested, slowly, smartly. A bond here, a low-risk stock there. David remembered Moishe reading the financial section with his morning tea, underlining companies he believed in. The Torah says gold doesn't sit idle, he used to say. David had a small mutual fund he'd abandoned after a dip. He logged in for the first time in months. It was still there, low but not gone. He researched, adjusted, and committed to adding $100 a month, no matter what. 4. Own something, even if it's small. David laughed when he read this one. Moishe used to point at his shop, a little storefront between a bakery and a shoe repair store, and say, I don't rent this corner, I own this corner. Ownership was pride. It didn't have to be a mansion or a car. It could be a tiny slice of something. Moishe believed renting was temporary, but ownership built legacy. David didn't have much, but he had ideas. He took one of his failed startup concepts, an app to help older adults track medications, and began reshaping it as a solo side project. Something small, something his. He registered the name, bought the domain, and called it Pillwise. 5. Give 10% even when it hurts. Tzedakah wasn't optional to Moishe. It was a sacred responsibility. You don't give because you have, he said. You have because you give. Whether it was $5 in a tzedakah box or a hot meal for a stranger, he always gave. David had been tight-fisted lately, but that evening he walked to the deli on his corner and paid for the meal of the elderly man in line behind him. No fanfare, just a nod. He felt something in his chest unwind, just a little. Just 6. Know what you own. Know what you owe. Every Sunday, Moishe would sit at the kitchen table with a pencil, calculator, and notebook. He tracked every penny, knew exactly how much fabric was in inventory, how much was in the bank, and how much he owed for the electric bill. You can't grow what you don't measure, he'd say. David hadn't looked at his full financial picture in months. He opened Excel, listed every debt, every asset, every subscription, and every dollar earned. It was humbling, but it was also empowering. He created a simple chart, red for debt, green for assets. For the first time in a long time, he saw the battlefield clearly. 7. Don't confuse wealth with appearances. Moishe wore the same coat for 20 years. He drove a dented old car and lived in a house that hadn't been updated since the 70s. But when he died, he left behind more than most people ever imagined. Real wealth doesn't shout, he once told David. It doesn't need to. David looked at his designer sneakers, the subscription boxes he never used, the cafe bills racking up each week. He started cutting, one by one, not because he wanted to suffer, but because he wanted to live differently. A month passed, then 2. David followed the 7 rules as best he could. He cooked more, walked more, thought more carefully. His savings started to grow. His debts slowly but surely shrank. The app he built started to get attention in a small online community. He hadn't launched it yet, but people were signing up for a beta version. He was building something, owning something. One morning, while sorting through more of his grandfather's boxes, he found an old black and white photo. Moishe, standing in front of his tailor shop, arms crossed, proud and upright. David pinned it above his desk. He wasn't rich. Not yet. But for the first time in years, he wasn't broke either. Not just in money, but in mindset. He had rules now, a framework, a legacy to follow. And that made all the difference.